Today's topic for Sightlines is a solemn one, where we usually try to highlight something fun or interesting in theme park design. Today we're talking about a topic of concern. Anyone who knows workers in the themed entertainment industry, particularly at the largest theme parks that draw national and international crowds, has heard stories. Some of these stories are outrageous, such as people swimming in fountains in Epcot or climbing up the sides of attractions. Some of these stories are upsetting, like fights breaking out between guests with their children watching. But some of these stories go beyond all that. Seriously, I'm drawing this out here to give you a chance to nope out of this video if you want. We'll understand and just hope to see you again next time. The worst incidents fall under the blanket category of assault against cast or team members. We're going to use cast member as a blanket term for employees across all theme parks in this episode. Just know that different parks use different terms. We're thankful that these assaults are a fairly rare occurrence, especially for those working in ride operations, shows, merchandise, food counter service, etc. Most of those cast members, even if they deal directly with the public, tend to be fairly well protected, and if a difficult situation arises with a guest, they can usually get off stage with relative ease, with management staff nearby to help out. That's not to say assaults don't happen in those places, and it's inexcusable when they do, but they are probably the rarest form of assaults on cast members. On the other hand, those most frequently on the receiving end of guest abuse, by far, are character performers. There's never been a good data-based analysis of this, but anecdotally, the majority of assaults tend to be of a violent nature where a guest grabs or strikes a cast member. And by far, most of those incidents occur during Halloween or scare events. The fight or flight response is very real, and sometimes people swing on cast members even if they don't mean to. Also, alcohol. In most cases, if a guest makes physical contact with an employee, they're going to be escorted out of the park and likely trespassed. The length of the ban can vary, but these kind of accidental assaults are a known risk in the haunts industry. If you can't control your reactions to being scared, and violence is one of those reactions, it's probably best you don't attend this type of event. There's not a lot of sympathy, even if it was just an accident. Most parks that have a haunt-type event work closely with local law enforcement, and do as good a job as seems possible protecting their employees from harm. And, again, while it certainly 100% does not at all or in any way excuse guest behavior, when you work a haunt, you always know this is a risk. Rarely is it personal, and most performers recognize the guest needs to be removed for everyone's safety, not just theirs. The kinds of violent assaults we've discussed so far are rare in the broad scope of employment in theme parks, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot more companies could do to protect their workers in these cases. But there is another class of assault that is far more traumatizing and far too common. We are speaking of sexual assault or harassment. We don't want to dwell on the more lurid details of these incidents too much here. If you're really that curious about some of the specifics, do your own research. Stories are out there. Anyone who has known one of the princess performers personally has heard some of the worst stories. Once in a while, a story will make the news. But most of the time, you aren't going to hear about these incidents when they happen. Sometimes, you might see a clip of the incident on social media. You're far more likely to see reporting about incidents where a costumed character is falsely accused of assault by greedy jerks with terrible kids trying to get a quick payday, but we digress. You might be asking, why? Given the risk of assault, risk of false accusations from guests looking to scam theme parks, physical demands of the job like wearing a fursuit in 100-degree Fahrenheit 99% relative humidity Central Florida summer, why would anyone still want to work this job? Well, we reached out to someone who did work these jobs to find out. Say hello to Preston.
Yeah, so I'm Preston. I worked for Disney back in 2018. I was a character performer for 6 months. Got to do. I was we use Disney lingo, so I was friends with Tigger, and I hung out with Tigger and the Country Bears, which basically means I was performing as those characters.
Now, believe it or not, this channel was originally going to feature a monthly show where we talked with current and former cast members, like Preston, from all different levels of these companies. And maybe someday we'll actually get to produce some episodes of that show. But this issue, character performers being abused by guests, was the main reason behind wanting to do that show in the first place, to provide voices to those people who make the magic every day, like Preston. Part of the reason I reached out to him was that I had a few specific questions I wanted to ask relating to this issue. My full-length conversation with Preston, lightly edited, will be available over on our Patreon and here for channel members, but it felt important in discussing this topic to not just let you hear from someone who worked this job in their own words, but also to put a face to the problem. We're not going into the details in this video, but Preston was a victim of assault himself. And he says that, in his estimation, every character performer like him has these stories.
I can't guarantee 100%, but I would put money down on the fact that at least 85 or 90% of people who have been a character performer at Disney World in Orlando have dealt with some sort of verbal or sexual harassment, if not abuse, by a guest. I think that I would say that, and maybe 100.
It tracks. Every character performer I've met outside of their jobs has these stories. So back to that question I asked a little bit ago. Why would anyone work this job?
About 80% of the job is great. And really, probably only 5 to 10% is bad in my mind. It depends on what you want. I mean, it depends on what you're interested in, what you like to do. For me, like I said, I did theater in high school, and I've always thought that the characters at Disney were so cool. And, I always thought it would be so cool to do that. It would be so cool to be on the side of that. And the moments where you are like interacting, where you meet a guest who has saved up for decades to come to Disney World, no matter where in the world they're from, or the kid whose favorite character is Tigger, or the 50-year-old man who's like a Country Bears enthusiast and wants your signature on something that like is a collectible item. Those moments are invaluable. It was every single day. There was something that happened. Most times a really good, heartwarming story.
Now, this is a very important point and one we want to make sure is very, very clear. Most interactions character performers have with guests rank somewhere between banal and pleasant. People come up, maybe give a hug, have a few moments of interaction, high fives, they take a picture, and they move along. Once in a while, the cast member makes the magic for a guest. And for some kids, they are the character and will create a core memory for that kid for life.
It is such a unique experience. And just the ability to, I mean, these kids, they look up to you. And like, there's really no other way to put it. When they say like, making the magic, I think that's a little what's the right word? A little
Hokey.
chuggy. Yeah.
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 A little corny. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you are in that role, it is real. When that is your job, it is real.
In a certain way, these cast members really are the magic. But that illusion, the perception by guests that you really are the character, is part of the problem. Because theme park companies want to go out of their way to maintain that illusion. They don't even like cast members talking about what characters they play.
Yeah, you could get fired. Yeah, they're serious about it. It is. They are. I mean, when I say brainwash, I kind of mean it. Like it's. If you are like, if you were to publicly, um, you're not gonna get fired if you're at dinner and you're with your friends and you just say, "I'm Tigger." Like
Right.
that's not gonna get you fired. If I did this interview with you and I was still in that job,
Yeah.
I might get fired.
This approach seems fine when it's protecting the illusion for kids in park, like pretending to believe in Santa Claus, but it leads to two downstream effects that aren't great. First, it allows people without a firm grip on reality to convince themselves that these cast members aren't real people. It's all fun and games when innocent kids are doing this, but it starts to get dangerous when adults are involved that can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy. To be fair, this is a difficult line for theme park companies to tread. They want to give a sense of escapism even to their adult guests, and as a result, it leaves character performers and their handlers trying to suss out whether the next person at the meet and greet is playing along in fiction or genuinely struggling to separate their fantasies about these characters from the real world. Every adult should know full well these are real people working a job, not sentient puppets shaped like their favorite fictional characters. But as long as the companies refuse to acknowledge that, it's just going to encourage more bad behavior.
We are told, or I remember being told, that we are basically highly discouraged from saying no. The characters can't say no unless it's within their character to be rude or dismissive. You can't say no about anything. Like you can't say like you can't shake your head. You can't deny things. That is the job of the character attendant to do. It happens because they know you can't say no. They know you have to be nice to them. And what I dealt with as a fur performer pales in comparison to what the princesses deal with all the time. Where the issue is with the guests who don't make that connection of like, this isn't just Mickey Mouse, this is a human being. That's where the issue is the divorce of those two things within the guest's mind. Like this is a character. This is not, and in their brain, I don't have to treat them like a person.
The second problem with the practice of euphemizing character performers is that it makes it harder for cast members to speak out. We're not so conspiratorially minded here to think that that's intentional on the part of these companies, but if it means less bad publicity, they're not going to complain either. When something as simple as, I perform as this character is grounds for discipline or firing, who's going to feel safe reporting a sexual assault that everyone else around seems to either be missing or ignoring?
I think it plays into it a lot. I think when people leave the company, I still for a long time after my time as a performer, for a long time I would not have talked about this stuff. And I just feel I feel like I can talk about it more. Whereas in the few years like right after, I still very much felt brainwashed again. I use that word, but I mean it is kind of how it feels.
In front of guests, Tigger cannot speak. He cannot protest. He can't protect himself, he can only walk away, leaving behind a line of disappointed guests, and there's no guarantee the perpetrator will be caught by the time the performer is able to tell someone what happened. Performers portraying villains are freer to speak up for themselves when something happens and dismiss a guest that is out of line. But even they are stuck playing a character. They can't speak their true feelings or demand that the guest be arrested for assault. They can tell the guest to leave, they can speak confidentially to their handler, or they can leave stage. That's it. Those are their options.
Gaston, or the person who was hanging out with Gaston that day, was lucky that he was hanging out with Gaston and not Prince Charming. Let's put it that way. Because Gaston can say, get out. He's Gaston. He's a jerk. Like, we know that about him. Prince Charming can't. And especially the fur characters, which is the characters you can't talk to or who can't talk to you.
Yeah.
They sure can't either.
This may be hard to hear, but it's not just the perpetrators and companies that share the blame. We, as guests, have at least some fault in this problem, if only to a small degree. We demand these experiences. We could eliminate 100% of this type of cast member abuse by getting rid of meet and greets altogether, or at least limiting them to distanced interactions like they were during the pandemic. But some theme park fans complained about those experiences and demanded the return of closer, more physically intimate, interactive meet and greets. Heck, some people treated the return of physical contact, like hugs, to Disney meet and greets as if it were a national holiday. I don't know if those people would accept the trade if a 100% guarantee to end all cast member abuse meant they could no longer hug Pooh Bear. But I wouldn't bet money on it. It would be easy to focus on this issue for 17 and a half minutes in a YouTube video and say, gosh, that's really rough for those cast members. I'll make sure to be extra nice to them next time I go to a theme park. Or even, I wish Disney would do something about that. It would be easy to point out the problem and just wrap up the video. But that's not enough for us here at Theme Parchive. We're not interested in exploiting the suffering of cast members just for content. We want to do what we can to fix this. We want something actionable. That's the primary reason I reached out to Preston in the first place, to see if he, as a former insider, had any solutions that we as guests can advocate these companies implement.
Therein lies the bigger issue with this whole topic of cast members dealing with abusive guests. Is how do you fix it? Can you throw money at it and fix it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you can. I think that maybe it needs to be a little more clear, like, hey, you can't treat characters this way, but at the same time, there's a fine line there because Disney cares so much about image and they care so much about preserving the magic and what we call character integrity. That's the lingo. That's when you say friends with Tigger, you're protecting the integrity of the character. There's a fine line there that you get to a point where you say, be nice to Rapunzel, she's a real person. And then you're like, hang on, at what point are we breaking character integrity and acknowledging that it's a performer and not Rapunzel? So I don't know. And again, that's where that's where the issue is how do you fix it? What do you do? And I don't know the answer.
Overall, between our ideas and Preston's, we have a few suggestions. The first is less standing around and more interactive, exploratory character experiences. You typically see these in smaller parks, like Disneyland. This allows cast members to escape uncomfortable or potentially problematic experiences. If something's going sideways, they can hoof it off stage and discuss with a handler. It also allows them to stay mobile and keep guest hands away.
This is somewhere where Disneyland and Disney World differ quite a lot. You will see Captain Hook, the evil queen, Peter Pan, just walking around the park in Disneyland, just hanging out, just walking around. There's a reason you don't see that at Disney World. And it's because Disneyland is probably about 70% locals. Disney World is probably about 20% locals, if not less, probably 10. The rest are tourists from either around the country or the world. So if Peter Pan's walking down Main Street, that's a way bigger deal to somebody who traveled from Canada to be there. So the autonomy of being able to walk away, to escape, to have more control over your situation that you get when you're roaming. Yes, you have it, but also there's a reason that the only roaming characters in Magic Kingdom are the country bears. Because nobody knows who they are.
But it's not 100% safe. Cast members, especially those in big fursuits, might not be able to see and might bump into guests or have other issues with maneuverability. Someone might trip or fall while trying to chase down a character.
Mind you, your field of vision is about this big when you don't have all this. When I would hang out with the country bears, we would roam around Frontierland, so much less rules. There were rules, but like if I wanted to sit down and play checkers with a kid, I could. And that's what they market it to be. In all the commercials you see, like, oh, this kid gets to run up to Cinderella in the middle of the street. If you put Mickey Mouse in the middle of Main Street USA, he's gonna get boom. They're gonna trample him. Country bears, I mean, some people are scared of them. So like you really have free range. And I would have so much fun. I play checkers with kids. I would walk up to people and I would just steal their food and walk away. I'd bring it back. But like I saw a couple walking, holding hands, I would sneak up behind them and I would like get them to grab both their hands and be like, I'm a part of this now, and walk with them like that. I'd go over to the bubble wands, little kiosk, and I'd grab it and I'd just run around, or I'd grab those fans with the little squirters, the little misters, and I'd just go squirting people in the back of their heads, just run away. We did dance competitions. I would go and I would find kids and like walk them to the ice cream kiosk and ask for an ice cream, and we'd give them one. Just so many little things.
This type of interaction makes for amazing, magical moments, but it does come with its own list of risks that need considering. The second solution seems almost too simple. Just add more handlers, especially at character dining.
Yeah, I mean that was the big issue with Crystal Palace was, and this is where, for me, this is where everything, I always say everything went down at Crystal Palace. Yeah. Like not everything, a lot of good stuff happened at Crystal Palace. I have great memories, but also everything that's kind of bad, or 95% of negative experiences that I had on that job were in Crystal Palace. And I think a lot of that is because they didn't have the right amount of attendance. They are the ones who can kind of, in a situation like that, they can be the enforcer in a way. They can be the person who has to come in and say, hey, we can't do that. Hey, that's not how this works. Things like that. That said, sometimes they don't see it because there's only 2 for 4 characters, and sometimes they don't see something is happening. Another thing is like they can't hear what the guests are saying to you. So like if they say something inappropriate, like the attendant doesn't know to go over there.
Every character should have at least one dedicated handler within direct visual contact at all times, and that person should be completely invested in their performer.
Sometimes you would get, I don't want to say a bad attendant, but a less attentive attendant, or an attendant who doesn't really care as much. And then other times it would just be, you'd have a good attendant, but they just wouldn't see it because they don't know what's being said to you. They don't they're not there. They're, 20, 30 feet away. Yeah, I mean, we were told we can't say no, and that's the attendant's job. But then when the attendant's far away, you're kind of put in a difficult position. That eliminates like 99% of the issues I had at Crystal Palace, is if I had an attendant with me the whole time.
Their jobs should be on the line. It's not fair that character performers like Preston aren't allowed to say, I had someone try to lift me into the air while I was playing Tigger without fear of punishment. But the person whose job it is to prevent that kind of guest behavior keeps their jobs even when they missed it happening. Our last suggestion might sound a little weird, but roll with us for a second. What about creating more meet and greets and character interactions with bizarre, unusual, or less popular characters? That's not to say that park companies should stop offering meet and greets with their most popular characters, just that giving a wider variety of experiences would benefit both guests and performers.
Things like that are cool.
Yeah.
That's a theme park. That's a difference between seeing Tarzan. If I see Tarzan, I'm like, oh, that's the guy from the movie.
Yeah.
If I see Push the Talking Trash Can, what? Like, I'm not going to see that anywhere else. I get that here, nowhere else. I can go home and watch Tarzan. That's an experience that is so exclusive to the park. And I think that's cool. So yeah, totally. I think that they should do that more often. And I think it would allow them to do a little more roaming characters and stuff like that. But the reality is they want recognizable IP everywhere. That would be awesome. But it's probably not going to happen. Like, I mean, the last e-ticket attraction that they made that was actually original was Expedition Everest. It's been, we're coming up on 20 years.
Right.
So, it's all IP now. They just don't do that anymore.
There are probably some other great solutions that we didn't list here today. We'd love to hear yours in the comments below. Again, we want to thank Preston for taking the time to speak with us about this topic. If you'd like to hear the full 90-minute conversation, either head over to our Patreon and sign up there, or join our channel memberships here on YouTube. You'll get access to a lot of other extras as well, with the details in their respective places. We hope that, even if this wasn't the most enjoyable episode of Sightlines, we at least gave you something to think about. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.